Hi, my name is Josh Feinberg, and I'm a Partner Development Specialist here with PC Connection. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit today about VDI deployment on Cisco UCS. If you take a VDI deployment on a traditional Blade server platform, and you sit down and you figure out that you need 24 or 32 servers, whatever it may be, oftentimes what isn't considered initially is the overhead that's associated with those servers. And by overhead, I mean you have your, let's say, 3 Blade server chassis. Well, each of those chassis is going to need a pair of management modules, and those are going to have to run back to a management server. You'll also need a pair of fabric switches for your SAN. You'll need switching for your Ethernet and all the cabling and adapters that go with that, and that's going to run back to top-of-rack Enduro switching as well. So it stops being about just the servers, and you start having to talk about the 6 management modules and the 16 actual switches, and that equates to a lot of investment for you just for one single Blade server deployment. Cisco UCS was designed differently. When they initially designed the solution, what they did is they designed it with a 10 gig fabric. Now, what that means to you is that you don't need a separate network to manage everything, right? And on top of that, your SAN and your LAN are merged into a single fabric, so all of a sudden you can get rid of all those adapters and all of those cables as well. So what Cisco really did is they took the intelligence with VMware and Hyper-V and they sort of embedded it in the network already. So what you're able to do is you can sort of configure everything automatically, right? Like you could take your MAC address or your BIOS settings or your host IP, and you can apply that to all your various servers without ever really having to visit each server individually. When you think about it, what they do is they totally pull out all that extra overhead for you. All of the overhead that you need to handle that workload gets reduced by 2/3, which is immediate ROI to you. And we've sat down and we've documented it multiple times. Another thing to think about with any VDI deployment is actual memory, right? I mean, that's the biggest limiting factor. The more memory you have, the more VDI sessions you can run in a single place. With Cisco UCS, you can have up to 768 gigs of memory in a single server across a couple sockets. In the end, they eliminate all that overhead for you, so you have less cabling, less power, less cooling. They don't have any of the switching. And then because of the expanded memory footprint, you might actually not need as many servers as you initially thought. And if you don't need as many servers, then of course you have less IT managing it, you have lower total cost of ownership, you have lower power consumption, things like that, which to you equates to a lot of extra money in your budget. Let's discuss some of the things you might encounter, some of the challenges you have on day of install, right? Just from a deployment perspective. Everything in IT right now is extremely mobile, right? It's moving constantly, whether it's users in and out of your environment or whether it's the different devices they're bringing or actually deploying a new server or repurposing one. So one of the challenges you're going to encounter is every time you try to deploy something new like a server in your environment, you have all these different experts you have to deal with, right? You have your storage expert and your server expert and your networking expert. And what you essentially need to do with all this new hardware is every time you want to repurpose a server or deploy a new server, you need to drop this off at their desk to make sure they can validate all the configurations and the settings in there so it's set up properly to work within your environment. And that's not usually an easy task because it's not well documented. So what UCS does, and this really, if you're going to pay attention to anything regarding UCS, this is really the huge differentiating factor in it, is it lets all of those day one experts we just talked about, right? And you can sit them down and they can just define a series of policies. Now, the policies can be about servers or storage or what SAN belongs to what server or what users are on which VLAN, virtualized applications, business applications, what the optimum configuration is for a VDI host or a web server or a host DNS, things like that. So they can define all these policies, and what they end up doing is they create something called a master template. And with this master template, you can go ahead and filter this information down and not ever have to visit them individually. So with the click of a mouse, you can sort of redefine and repurpose the way your servers work within your architecture extremely simply. Again, my name is Josh Feinberg. We urge you to reach out to your sales account manager so we can continue the conversation. If you don't have one, please feel free to give us a call at this 800 number so we can have the discussion with you. And if you're interested in visiting our website to look at some more of our Chalk Talk material, the URL is www.pcconnection.com/Cisco Chalk Talk. Thanks so much.